Welcome back to Between Two Bs, the official podcast of the B2SMB Institute and our 5,000 plus business to small business professionals. Christopher Rubin of BrandMultiplier.ai shares how to transform AI solutions into compelling stories. Stories that resonate with small businesses. As a widely recognized marketing, I'll just say a savant, he lays out techniques to communicate AI's value, moving beyond all that technical jargon to create narratives that drive mass adoption and sales success. Join us.
If you sell at scale to small business, you need to be here. The 7th Annual B2SMB Institute Leaders Forum, May 14th and 15th in Sonoma, gathers business to small business executives from dozens of major brands to talk shop. The winning, keeping, and growing of SMB customers. Our 2025 B2SMB Institute Leaders Forum extends the central theme of our 2024 events, selling successfully in a small business marketplace that's seen extraordinary growth and change in the last 2 years. Combining keynotes from B2SMB sales superstars with frequent small-sided breakouts, the 2025 Leaders Forum presents research-based insights, best practice playbooks, and a steady dialogue of shared wisdom on winning, keeping, and growing SMB customers. Our B2SMB Institute Leaders Forum sold out these last 2 years, so it's not too early to save your spot at our top-to-top networking and strategy exchange for senior B2SMB execs. Get your tickets today at b2smbi.com/leadersforum25. Are you ready to master the new sell? Join us for the 6th Annual Leaders Forum in Sonoma, hosted by the B2SMB Institute. Tickets now on sale for the B2SMB Institute 2025 Leaders Forum. Members attend free. Email info@b2smbi.com for more information.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Dave Walker here with the B2SMB Institute and the Between Two Bs podcast. I have really been looking forward to this conversation because I'm talking to a fellow marketer, and I love fellow marketers. I love people who I appreciate their marketing chops and skills and their backgrounds. And so it is my great pleasure to welcome Christopher Rubin. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's great to be here. Appreciate that kind intro. Indeed, it's always fun to talk to someone who, has some of the background and understands some of that sort of more esoteric stuff that most people just don't give a crap about.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like the only people that we can really impress are fellow marketers, right? Because we sit. And so we got to kind of cling to these moments where we get to impress each other. I first came across your marketing content and your posts on LinkedIn, I want to say about 6 months ago. And I just kept coming back to it and going, God, this guy has very interesting and I think very similar points of view that I have. But before we get into that, I want to give you the opportunity to just give us your background, how you came to be a marketer, what are kind of your philosophies, what are your approaches, all that good stuff.
Well, I kind of fell ass backwards, pardon the French, into copywriting. I came out of college not really sure what I wanted to do. I just knew that I enjoyed writing, and I've been writing since I was a kid. I just knew I loved it, and I felt like I was pretty good at it. And got an internship at a local magazine, and they started publishing me right away. And so I was, the validation gave me a little confidence. And at my real job, where I was actually getting paid, I was waiting tables, and this owner of a local agency came in one time and had basically tracked me down and said, hey, we're looking for a copywriter. And I literally had not even heard the term before. I don't think, at least that's the way it is in my memory. And, started part-time making the coffee and writing a little copy. And then right away, he put me in front of their two biggest clients, Disney and Hard Rock Cafe. And
wow,
I fell in love with the idea of, this thing they called a brand, but especially the kind of brand that can build love and loyalty that, transfers over generations. And so I wanted to get inside of that and try to figure out, how do you build something like that? And so I went full time with Hard Rock. I was the producer on the first ever website for Hard Rock Cafe International.
Wow.
and then just kind of took off, basically followed storytelling and digital from then on, and worked at big agencies, a lot of enterprise brands. I think where this dovetails with our discussion in particular is I was always a kind of a tech nerd. I had a TRS-80. I'm dating myself, but I learned how to write BASIC on a TRS-80 when I was, I think, 8 years old. So tech and language and psychology, I was always kind of fascinated with the brain. And then my journey with AI began in 2012 in Silicon Valley. I was working with Google and Microsoft and some other big tech firms, and I saw some of this stuff in the lab. Actually, right around the time that they had the breakthrough with the neural networks, which is, as you know, what underpins all of the modern AI today. And then cut to 2022. And once I got my hands on GPT 3.5, I knew this technology was going to change everything. To kind of bring this home, what I've learned is that AI is not a buzzword. It's really a foundation for a massively powerful set of tools, and specifically for business growth. In the marketing context, my key insight has been that effective marketing it's so data driven, right? Everybody talks about everything has to be data driven. Okay, sure. Table stakes, but it's not about the data. It's about crafting narratives that resonate emotionally with the audience that stands to benefit the most from what you have to offer. And that's what drives business. The emotional resonance is what creates affinity and loyalty and, drives sales over time. So that's probably how I would kick things off in terms of my background.
Be still my beating heart. Because, first of all, there's remarkable parallels between our backgrounds. I'm considerably older than you, but many of the same kind of stops along the way. Started as a cop writer. I too fell ass backwards into it. I was an English major, couldn't get a job, doing quote regular writing. I even got refused by the Army Times in Washington, D.C. So I have that to put on my resume. But long story short is I'm with you. I believe that the most compelling marketing is story driven. Now, I wish I had, reams and reams of data that could prove that out, but it's just simply been my experience that found those things so compelling. So here we are, because I couldn't agree with you more. Here we are on the doorstep. I still feel like it's a doorstep of AI and this enormous technology revolution that is meant to sweep up and bring in all of the users that, frankly, the internet brought in its early days. As someone said that I quoted, it's becoming like electricity. AI is becoming just ubiquitous in what its utility is to everyone. So what I want to kind of crack open is, from the perspective of a storyteller marketer, are we telling the story of AI, just broadly stated, and then we'll specifically talk about small businesses. Are we telling the story of AI right?
Yeah, it depends on how we define we, right? I think I would like to think that, us over here on my team, we're doing a pretty good job. And I want to just add that, you mentioned you wish there were reams of data supporting this idea that storytelling is the way to grow a business. We've done that research. We're rolling out an offering called Storyline that makes all of that data openly available, but, it exists, and we're developing our methodology on top of that. To your question about, are we telling the story right? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it is. And again, it depends on who you're looking at, right? Who is that we? I think what I might say is the first place I like to start, and we got an SMB audience, right? So let's do this, Dave. Let's tell the story of AI as maybe we feel like it should be told. Let's scratch the surface there.
Yeah.
So I think we start with first principles, which is just the term itself, artificial intelligence, AI. What I would encourage you and your audience to do is, instead of artificial, use that A for augmented intelligence. And the intelligence that's being augmented is our own. So these tools are scaffolds, ladders, superpowers, whatever you like, but you bolt them onto your existing subject matter expertise, your talents, your unique capabilities, your life experience, really important. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later around that blend of machine and human. And then building on that, a useful framing, I think, what's really actually literally helpful when you're working with the machines is to anthropomorphize them, right? Act as if you're talking to a human person. And so one specific framing to continue building is a hyper ambitious intern. So, we've worked with interns, right? They're super eager and they're ambitious and they want to be successful, but they're also very inexperienced. And so, this intern happens to have access to the entire breadth and depth of all human knowledge ever created, right? And it never sleeps.
Right.
But it's all about the feedback. You have to give it very prescriptive guidance, and then you have to be patient, and you have to give it really prescriptive feedback in terms of how to make the output better. And the one more example I'll give that I can't take credit for, Andrew McAfee, this really smart guy at MIT, came up with this framing of the 3 C's: clerk, colleague, and coach. And so if you think of making this machines a person and then putting it into a role, it really kind of neatly can break down into those three kind of buckets, very generally. And so I'll just land the plane here and say that my mission centers on blending the irreplaceable elements, human elements of creativity and empathy and emotional intelligence with the analytical power of AI. And that's how you create the stories that genuinely connect. But then that's how you superpower the stories at scale by using these tools, to their best abilities.
The copywriter comes screaming forward because of, the word choice is so incredibly important. And I think I think I've even complained to you in the past, is one of my worries about the story being told of AI is really from an engineer's perspective. It's really from a developer's perspective. It's genuine pride, legitimate pride in this incredibly powerful tool and platform that engineers have built.
Yeah.
But that appeal, the engineer's appeal, I think runs out with early adopters. And I think there's plenty of history on that shows that technology advances have that first 10% that really are just enthralled by the features. But I think now we're into the big part of the curve, the big belly part of the curve, where we're trying to now appeal to the masses that really are going to be the ones who are not early adopters, but the adopters that really are going to make this into an absolutely enormous market. To your point of just simply of trying to give them language and trying to give them even a vision in their head of what this thing is supposed to do. I'm with you. I think that artificial is it's an engineer's word, and it's really kind of it's a builder's word, and it's not a user's word. And I think that the user's word, absolutely. I've not heard the 3 C's. Those are perfect, absolutely perfect. So how do you then craft from that the story of AI so it is compelling to the more novice user, the person who is a little bit intimidated, a little bit afraid, really wants to see, they excuse a lot of that, by the way, with the objection that, well, I really need to see the return on investment. You know, hey, if you can't figure out what a return on investment for as of an assistant that really doesn't cost any money, I can't help you there.
Right.
You just get over that. But what do you think is the story for this next big part of the bell curve?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I give a talk to small businesses, chamber of commerce, that kind of thing. And I start with FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, right? It's anxiety. And
Right.
what do we know cures all of these obstacles? Those are obstacles to growth, right? And what do we know cures all of those? Action.
Mm-hmm.
Action absorbs anxiety. Action cures fear. So, back to your point about it being this free assistant, like there is no reason to not be using these tools. There's just none. There's
Mm-hmm.
really great tools that are totally free, no strings attached. Well, arguably where your data goes, et cetera, but that's for another day. I think, I want to build on what you said about the engineers writing the story and the developers. The problem is, as you were touching on, they tend to focus on the features and the capabilities rather than the business impact and the value creation. And this is
Mm-hmm.
where the disconnect is, especially I think with SMB leaders. And so, you asked earlier about the story. I think currently it feels like it's trapped between two extremes. You've got overhyped sort of magical thinking that promises unrealistic outcomes. And then you've got these highly technical explanations, that just don't connect, like coming from the engineers and the developers. And so what's the way forward? I mean, it feels like the profound opportunity is to shift the AI narrative from how it works,
Mm-hmm.
to how it creates value. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Translating the technical capabilities into business growth stories, emphasizing the symbiotic relationship between human creativity and AI productivity, and showing how they amplify each other rather than compete. And certainly forever to drop this replacement idea, that somehow AI is a story of replacing us. It's more like a beast you need to learn how to ride than something that's coming to eat you and your family, maybe.
Exactly, the beast. Um, I, I I don't know how many use cases you digest in any given week. I would imagine it's a lot. But when it comes to AI, particularly in small businesses, I'm always struck by the fact that the use cases are the best marketing I've
Mm,
seen out there.
mm,
The articulation of someone who's a user, and when they're talking about how it has relieved them of the grunt work of trying to figure out how to schedule their wait staff, you
yeah,
know,
sure.
or how to take care of basically their irrigation problem. in their cornfields. I mean, the use cases really, and I give a lot of credit to Microsoft for having, frankly, done one of the best jobs of creating a library of over 100 different use cases in great detail.
Mm.
But bottom line is, why do use cases of actual users, why are they so compelling and the marketing sometimes is not?
Oh, sure. I mean, that reminds me of story again, right? Those are stories. And
Right?
we relate to stories. We can connect to stories and we want to be able to see ourselves as the hero of the story. I mean, I've got one here in front of me that I've used before. It's from McKinsey's latest research. The mid-sized professional services firm in Boston implemented AI tools the verified results within 90 days, they reduced their customer research time by 70%. Their CAC, their client acquisition cost, dropped by 50% in this first 6 months. And most importantly, they saw a 40% increase in qualified leads. And so, what's the key takeaway? Firms seeing the biggest gains aren't necessarily the one with the biggest budgets, because this was a small scale pilot where they started small, they tested things, they optimized, they doubled down on what worked, and they left everything else behind. And I just have to mention one more thing, which is, you mentioned those examples of like optimizing the wait staff scheduling or whatever all these use cases might be in a small business. Again, there's no reason not to use these tools. Just plug the problem in and see what you get. Do not assume it's going to be the end all be all. Absolutely not. But it's a great jumping off point. It's like having an extra brain in the room that, again, doesn't cost anything. So why not, use it as a springboard, test out some ideas, give it a problem to solve. And, maybe you're going to get nothing. Maybe. But actually, no, you're going to get something. Maybe you're not
Right.
going to get value out of it, but you're certainly going to get something. And there's going to be some kind of morsel in there that you can build on.
Who do you think, as marketers, we're always students of other people's marketing. Who do you think is doing it well right now? Who's doing the story of AI well?
Hmm. Gosh. I mean, I think OpenAI is doing a really great job. The recent example that comes to mind is, they put out the recent version of the image generation tool. This is going to be esoteric for a second, Dave. This is probably over the heads of our audience. They probably don't care much about this, but to answer your question, they put out the recent model of their image, the recent version of their image generation model,
Mhm.
and basically squashed Google's announcement of their brand new model, which actually is really impressive and super powerful and totally multi-purpose and multimodal, in fact. But because OpenAI did the storytelling right, in my opinion, and somehow just mastered the media strategy, essentially, once again, they sort of big-footed Google's announcement when in fact, Google is, essentially the creator of a lot of this stuff going all the way back to what I mentioned in 2012. So I think that's one example. I want to name one more, which is there are these platforms like Jasper and writer.com and copy.ai that, they are telling a story well, which is try our tools and we're going to do all these amazing things, but it's a magical thinking story because if you have any expertise like myself, like my team, you get in there and try these tools, they are way over promising. Essentially what they're saying is answer a couple of questions and we're going to tell you what your brand identity is and what your brand voice is. And we're going to start generating copy and your brand voice sounds just like you is what they love to say. Sounds just like your brand. Bullcrap. Like it is total garbage. You need a human in the loop with expertise and real creativity and that due diligence on, know thyself, brand identity, know your audience, brand positioning, and then, who are you up against, right? You've got to find that distinctive lane to drive your brand through against the competition and to drive right through to the hearts and minds of the people who stand to benefit the most.
This is such an excellent point. And I think that those who I believe are doing it wrong,
Mm.
not to name any names, but those who are not doing it correctly are the ones who really, frankly, are tapping into perfect phrase, magical thinking. They're trying to take advantage of the mystique that AI has amongst most all of us because we're just dumbfounded at what it does
Mm.
and translate into, oh yeah, it can basically fix your entire business in a day. And no, it can't. And no, it never will. So I want to kind of segue into this idea that we're approaching an AI cliff.
Mm.
And it's really expressed best in the form of, sure, AI can help you write 850 emails a month, but is that a good idea? It's not
Right.
necessarily a good idea to kind of produce that volume.
Mm.
It's efficient, but not terribly effective. using that as kind of a metaphor for the challenge, are we approaching that point where people start to realize, hey, I used it for a couple things and it actually helped me with my wait staff, but when it comes to really creating my menu for the spring or new cocktail recipes that I want to try, not so much. It's not really helping me that much. Do you think we're approaching an AI cliff, and is it really just simply more than anything a matter of not framing the question right to our eager intern?
Certainly a lot of that latter point. The cliff is an interesting idea. I mean, it reminds me of the trough of disillusionment, right? I think it's the Gartner's hype curve, right? And I think we're
Right, right.
definitely entering the trough now of disillusionment. But that's because, to your point in your question, I think it's around expectations. We've got to properly set the expectations,
Hmm.
and then also within that, to the latter point of your question, the latter part of your question, when you're talking about, are you asking the right question? The technical term is a prompt. Really, it's just a conversation. And, again, think of it like a human. Have that conversation. You're not going to solve it in the first back and forth, but stick with it. I think perseverance is important, and persistence, but then also, again, the expectations. It's like you said, it's not going to fix your business. It's not going to solve the world's problems. But it is a powerful tool. And if you think of it like a hammer or a power drill or something much more robust than that, it's a tool. And it's up to you to decide what's the best way to wield that tool, how to get the most value from that tool, and when to set the tool down and just take it from there with your own, human expertise and creativity and your lived experience, I think is really, really important.
Well, speaking of creativity, I'm curious to get your answer on this question that I ask a lot of people. Do you believe that AI ultimately will be a creativity tool? Will be something that enhances creativity?
Oh, it already is. I mean, it has been really from day one since I started back in 2022.
Mhm.
But again, it's about the expectation, setting that appropriately, and not over relying on these tools. Like
Mhm.
image generation is a decent example. If I want an animated picture of my daughter skiing here in Aspen with our brown goofy poodle, I can put in that prompt, and I'm going to get four versions that are pretty decent,
Mhm.
but is that
Mhm.
something that I'm going to frame and put on the wall? No. Is it
Mhm.
something I might put on a jokey birthday card? Maybe. Again, it's expectations, and it's about not over relying on the tools. Is it an enhancement for creativity? Absolutely. But you need subject matter expertise to inform whatever it is that you're producing. Quick example might be, if you're looking to produce a long form thought leadership article for your CEO on behalf of your CEO, and you don't deeply understand that CEO's lived experience, beyond their resume, and then also their subject matter expertise on what your business does and who you aim to serve, that article is going to sound like pap. I wrote an
Mhm.
article called Pap GPT where I collected all of the pat phrases that GPT puts out. Pap's a British phrase. It means like a tasteless, bland sort of pudding or mush. And that's essentially what it creates. If you don't inject the human expertise and emotional resonance that we get innately just by being human.
There was a great carousel post on LinkedIn the other day from a woman who writes a lot about AI and about the application of AI for content. And she basically was bemoaning the fact that unfortunately, we're seeing a dilution of actual voice and actual originality and actual meaning from
Mm,
everybody running to AI to produce their latest LinkedIn post about getting better at LinkedIn. And it just kind of had this sameness about it, this blandness about it. And I wonder, do you observe that as you look at copy that's being kind of generated by AI? Do you see actually a dilution effect of originality and those important things?
absolutely, especially coming from the mid-market and smaller companies, because they're being romanced by the idea of content at scale, with very little effort. And again, it produces content that if you read it, it sounds pretty okay. It doesn't have typos. Doesn't have grammatical errors. Like it flows. It sounds all right. But if you apply any scrutiny whatsoever, or if you know anything about the subject matter, immediately you realize this is kind of shit. It's just not
Mhm.
good. Um, and so, I think that is a trap that a lot of small business owners are falling into because it's so alluring. Oh, I can create 40 blog posts in 20 minutes. But are those quality blog posts?
Right.
Is that gonna accomplish your objective of delivering value to your audience? Almost a guarantee that it won't. So yeah, it feels like a
Yeah,
trap.
and I think that it takes the place of I don't know if this is the right way to describe it, an original response, a response in the moment. You know,
Yeah.
it's manufactured, it's engineered, it's generated. It's not really just the simple. I'm sure that in your past life you've done testimonials, you know, that because the testimonials were so much more compelling than anything that we could come up with as
Yeah.
copywriters.
Yeah.
And that's what I worry sometimes about the use of AI becomes a negative ultimately
Mm.
to those kind of looking from the outside and going, well, wait a minute, where is the original content lately on LinkedIn? I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Eh,
mean, I know yours is. I
eh,
try to do
Thanks.
it, but
Yeah.
you know, it's when you don't play by the rules of the algorithm, which is
Mm.
another, you know, that's a subject for another day. When
Yeah.
you don't play by the rules of the algorithm, sometimes you are punished for being unique or original and not kind of hitting the points that the algorithm wants to reward you for.
It's such an important point. I mean, the term of art that seems to be catching on is AI slop. The internet is becoming inundated with AI slop, AI generated just garbage. It's just pap. It's just bland, tasteless, volume for volume's sake in terms of content. But I think what's going to rise above over time, again, inflected and injected with the things that I've mentioned quite a few times already today, is it boils down to taste and touch. That's the phrase that I'm using lately. It's the most concise way of referring to all these other things that humans bring to the equation, to that creative flywheel in interaction with these machines. You know, it's the taste and the touch that helps determine, is it bland, boring, tasteless garbage, or is it something that really resonates emotionally and most importantly delivers value in the form of insight or a unique point of view, or relatability, like we talked about earlier, really in the form of story.
Obviously, a marketer who uses AI, what are some of your favorite stories of, God, you know, AI really helped me a lot with a particular project or a particular, really inspired a particular thing for me creatively?
Sure. I mean, the best answer is it inspired me to create BrandMultiplier.ai. You know, it's a productized version of our agency offering that I'd had going for a decade, specifically targeted at small to mid-sized businesses, trying to heal all the pain points, traditional pain points of working with an agency. One of which is the big budgets or the unpredictable budgets, big team of people all billing hourly. You weren't really sure what to expect, and so you know, fix the price point, make it a subscription model, and you know, become a long-term partner over time. But building on that, to your point, I mean, I think, you know, AI is in the driver's seat, right? It's literally at the end of our name. It's BrandMultiplier.ai. You know, it's at the end because that's where it belongs. It's behind. It's in the infrastructure. It's behind the process and the workflows and the efficiency. And you know, we leverage it for things like customer segmentation, content optimization, sentiment analysis, predictive analytics. But you know, the human is in charge, and usually that's me. Sometimes it's another human on my team. But we are the rulers of the machines, at least for now, and you know, hopefully indefinitely. We talked earlier about, you know, let's focus on the outcomes, right? That's what's most important, not necessarily what it can do, but what it can produce or enable. And those are things like lower CAC, you know, larger lifetime value, increased brand sentiment, you know, higher performance of your content. But ultimately, it's always tying back to business growth. And these tools are super powerful. Again, there's no reason not to be using them.
So, you know, from early days of AI to SMB, there was this proposition that in the hands of small businesses, AI will level the playing field. AI will make small businesses competitive with big businesses. A, do you believe that? And B, if you do believe that, how? And C, if you don't believe that, how could it actually ultimately help them be competitive?
Well, the answer is hell yeah. And again, that's why I created BrandMultiplier.ai. I think, you know, there's a lot of, you know, there's FUD, right, around AI adoption, especially small mid-market. It's risky, it's uncertain. You know, it could be potentially be a rabbit hole that doesn't produce results. So I think it's really the best reason why you should work with a partner. You know, bolt on this capability instead of trying to build it in-house.
Hmm.
And so again, that's the origin and the core thesis of our business. You know, we can first we do our deep due diligence to understand your business, your brand, your audience, your competition, et cetera. We produce something called a brand playbook, which becomes the North Star for all of your marketing moving forward. We create a comprehensive strategy to get that story out across all the touch points that matter most to your audience. But then we understand your business so that we can begin to potentially build custom AI tools, specific sort of custom fit to your current assets and resources. Most importantly, your human resources. So you might have a person on your team who's great at social media. She loves it. Her name's Sally. And you got a guy who's just great with your email. His name's John. And Sally and John, they have lots of things on their plate that are not the best use of their capabilities, but they have to be done. Those are things that just have to get done. If we can come in and do that assessment and figure out what those things are and take those off their plate, guess what happens to John and Sally? Now they have free time to do the more creative work, the more strategic work, the things that are much higher value to the business. And so it just feels like that combination of tooling and human resources, and then just sort of taking over the marketing to the full extent that it makes sense, and then leaving whatever, for you internally you want to keep hold of. Then, it's essentially a customized relationship that sort of produces bigger and better ROI over time.
Excellent point. And I think that I believe that it in the hands of small businesses who really embrace what AI can do for them and really kind of understand it, and not deeply either. I don't think you have to have a
Right.
deep understanding of, particularly if you describe it as I love the eager intern. I mean, that's exactly right. You can send them off to do the grunt work of filing in the summertime and shit like that. But that eagerness and that depth of knowledge that it has can really unlock all sorts of incredible potential.
Yes.
As you think about the pace at which AI is changing right now, and it seems like there's a revolution every single day. I too played with DALL-E, when it first came out, and I was like so amazed by what it could do. And then I realized, well, just wait till next week, and there's going to be another platform of AI created artwork. And long story short is, how do you plan for this, Chris? I mean, you've got a
Mm.
business that's built on AI that is going through rapid evolution. It's the same question I actually asked a pair of product developers, chief product officers from two very large businesses building products for small business. And I said, how are you laying out your Gantt chart? How are you laying
Mm.
out basically your project management calendar when
Mm.
when you don't know on any given day if something's going to swoop in with all the, wonderful value that it comes with, but God, it's so disruptive. Every
Mm.
minute feels like it's another disruption. So how are you actually organizing your thinking, organizing your team, organizing your product to really respond to that volatility?
Yeah, such a great question. Yeah, the pace, I think breakneck is the best term.
Because it does break your neck, really.
Yeah, well, you're trying not to get your neck broken. Yeah, totally. I think the way in here is similar to some advice I've given to clients, which is focus on the problems that you're trying to solve. That's the window into the way that these tools can be most valuable and give you the best return. And that's what we're doing. To your question, we're staying focused on the problems that we need to solve for our clients, for their business, and for our business as well. So how do we stay nimble and agile, regardless of what tool we're using? So we use all of them. All of the frontier models, all of the tools. A new one comes out, we're trying it, we're testing it, we're trying to break it, essentially. Where are the limitations? Let's find the outside edge of what this tool is capable of, and then we file that away, and we understand, that's on our bench, so to speak. And we got a loaded bench of these tools just waiting to be tapped into the game, right? And so the game is constantly changing, the tools are constantly changing, but the problems also are continuing to change, but that our focus stays clear on those problem sets. And I think that is the smartest way to do it. The different way to put it is, don't get married to a particular tool. I have to urge the audience to not refer to AI as ChatGPT, because that is just one tool in a vast ocean of all kinds of options. And here's where I'll put a plug. I don't have any business relationship with this company, but perplexity.ai, if you're not
Yeah.
already using it, you have to do that immediately. Go right now, set up a free account. Can choose one of, like, I think they keep changing it, but you can have like 6 different models behind Perplexity. So you can run a prompt through GPT's latest reasoning model, then you can change it and run it through Claude's latest Sonnet 3.7. You could change it again and run it through Mistral. You can run it through Meta's Llama open source model, on and on. They've got deep research. They've got DeepSeek in there for anybody in there has been paying attention. So it's the best Swiss Army knife for AI tools that exist right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I use kind of the spectrum, and I find Perplexity to be the one that is best at grounding you in citations.
Yeah.
It really, really understands, okay, back this up. This isn't you're postulating. This is actually based on, and here's where I drew it from, and
Yes.
constructs that very, very well. But I think that, similar, slightly different in the way I kind of try to word our our organization's attempt to keep up with all the different changes that are going on in just simply the quote niche of AI as it's applied to small businesses is that the utility doesn't change. The tools change, but the utility of what you're trying to do doesn't fundamentally change. And
Mm,
so it's just a matter of saying, hey, if I'm hanging a door, sometimes I need a screwdriver, sometimes I need a hammer, sometimes I need a leveler, and sometimes I need a can of paint.
mm,
It's different, for who the user is really, and what they're trying to accomplish. But what you're trying to do, which is hang a new door, that really doesn't change. And that seems to, at least that lends some courage to virtue on my part of just being some days overwhelmed by, oh my God, look at what this is.
yeah,
And I don't know
nice.
about you, but I do find myself when something like DALL-E comes along, I will go down that rabbit hole for a good 4 to 6 hours of just messing around with it, and seeing what it does and being amazed by it. Chris, this
Absolutely.
has been absolutely wonderful, and I knew it would be, but what I appreciate more than anything, and maybe where you can end, is really as you think about your next 20 years and building this great brand that you're building right now and great capability that you're building. Where do you see this taking you? In the world that I used to live in, ad agencies, and it was really about winning the next big client. It was about getting the Addy Award. It was being named media agency, whatever it was. There's always kind of benchmarks of accomplishment. Do you think in those terms, or do you maybe think more openly because of what AI has done that, God, the possibilities are endless? How do you think about it?
Yeah, that's a nice question. Thank you. I mean, same as you. I've got the awards and that kind of stuff in the background. That was fun, especially when I was younger. It was validation. It built courage and confidence to try some things that I might not have tried earlier in my career. But to your question, what I'm focused on is one thing. And that is helping to drive growth for clients' businesses in ways that they may not be capable of doing themselves.
Mhm.
To do this on a subscription model where the budget is predictable, but the services are fully customized, specific to the problem set for each client individually. That to me is the work that I will follow for the rest of my career. It's the most exciting that I've encountered. It's the combination of all of the things I'm passionate about: technology, creativity, story, and psychology. Jungian psychology is shot through our methodology. It's hugely powerful in terms of archetypal narratives and collective unconscious. I could go on and on. I'm married to a psychoanalyst, so we initially connected on our first date over Jung. So
So in Scientology terms, you're clear, right?
I'm not familiar with that, but we're certainly up on how the brain works and the importance, the critical importance of emotions and what role
Mhm.
those play in decision making.
Absolutely. Again, this has been absolutely wonderful. Any final thoughts? I know you're going to be speaking at our Sonoma event. I can hardly wait. You're on a great panel with some great marketers who are, I think, making great strides in attempting to capture that lightning in a bottle of the best way to describe their products, their capabilities, their value proposition, all those things. But any last words from you?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm really excited about that opportunity to talk about storyline to the audience. Ultimately, when you think about everything we've been talking about today and put it through the lens of business growth, in my opinion, and I'm prepared to back it up, it's really all about the story that you're telling. And if that story doesn't directly connect with the people who stand to benefit the most from what you have to offer, there's a gap in that story. And your storyline is the story that connects most directly and resonates and begins to create kind of a feedback loop between your business and that group of people. So that's what I'm excited about. I'm looking forward to talking about it when I see you in California in May.
I am too. Thanks very much, Chris Rubin.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Between Two Bs, the official podcast of the B2SMB Institute and our 5,000 plus business to small business professionals. Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes at the crossroads of the big B and the small B. Between Two Bs on your favorite streaming services.